Hey boys and girls, welcome back to another week in a Bible study. Man, what a beautiful day it is outside. And I'm glad you're here with me so we can study a little bit more about Gideon this week. And don't forget, you can join me, Brother Tim, here every week at 1 p.m. with Calvary Baptist Church for a Bible study. Just always make sure you get your parents' permission, as we're on YouTube, Facebook, as well as our webpage. Now, as a quick recap, last week we talked about Gideon, and we talked about the Israelites, how they lived in suppression to the Midianites. They were the invading armies and those around them that really didn't like the Israelites. Now, Gideon had met one of the angels of God underneath an old oak tree, and he had told him that God was going to deliver him and deliver his people from the Midianites. Now, of course, Gideon had some questions to that as to whether or not this was truly what God was going to have for him. So he challenged the angel, and the angel made him put cakes on a piece of a stone there, and it caused it to get lapped up by fire to prove that what he was saying was coming from God. And of course, Brother Tim got to enjoy a tasty treat as well. And then on top of that, he rebuilt altars. He set a fleece out at night and let it come up the next morning dry from the dew around it. And then he did it again, and it came up soaking wet while the ground was dry. And all of these things Gideon had asked of the angel. And the final solution was that God was truly going to come through for Gideon and his people and deliver them from the Midianites as he promised. So following that, Gideon goes ahead and he gathers up his armies. 32,000 people he got together to go up against the Midianites. And he found himself at the well of Herod, and they set up their camp around the Midianites. He had a really good position of high ground around them. And God looked down upon Gideon. He looked down upon the 32,000. And you know what, boys and girls? God said, "You've got too many people." He says, what you need to do is thin the herd. So Gideon looks towards his people and he says, all of y'all that are afraid, he says, I want you to go home. And I only want to keep those that are willing to fight and willing to go against the Midianites. And you know how many people left? 22,000 people. So he started with 32,000, and now he's only got 10,000 people to go against a huge army. God is really trying to show something right now with Gideon and his people. So here's Gideon with 10,000 people. And God is still telling him that he's got too many. So he tells Gideon, he says, take your people down by the water. He says, and when you go down there, you're going to have two types of people. You're going to have those that go down and lap the water up like a dog, and then those that go down on one knee and take up the water. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So as Gideon travels down with his people, they come to a spot of water. And they get down and he tells the people to drink. Now there's two types. The first type get down and they look at the water and they're so thirsty, they're lapping it up like dogs. But then there's the second group that gets down on one knee and they take the water and they keep observing everything around them. And they're looking and they're drinking the water. And God tells them of those people, there was 300. And he says, those are going to be the ones that you're going to take. You see, there was something about that. Those that were lapping the water up like a dog were not paying attention to what was going on around them. And they were not looking around, whereas the others were observant. And they could see what was going on while still getting the water. And those were the people that God said, I'm going to give you the victory through those 300 men. So now that God has his men, he has the 300 chosen. And they're all encamped about around the Midianites. And of course, God looks down to Gideon and he tells him, I want you to go and listen for the fear of your people to encourage them. He says, go down there and listen. I want you to hear what the Midianites have to say about Gideon and his army. So Gideon takes his servant as instructed by God and he heads down and he sneaks up on the Midianites. And he gets as close to the encampment as possible because he wants to hear what they have to say. Young man, behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the host of Midian, and came unto a tent, and smote it, that it fell, and overturned it, that the tent lay along. Man, that sounds amazing. This is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel, for into his hand God had delivered Midian and all his host. That's the interpretation of your dream, soldier. What an amazing turn of events. Here Gideon and his men were able to hear that the enemy was afraid of them. So Gideon goes back to his army and he encourages all of his men. Remember, 300 of them. And he gives them instructions. First, he says, I'm going to give you a lantern. He says, I'm going to give you a vase. and I'm going to give you a trumpet. And what's going to happen is we're going to sound the trumpets, we're going to break the vase, and then we're going to raise our lanterns high in an effort to strike fear into the hearts of the enemy. And we'll see what happens, because God's promised to deliver. So he takes the trumpets. It's about midnight. So pretend that it's dark outside and the enemy can't see anything. And in the distance they hear, and all of a sudden, there goes. The lanterns are up in the air, and the people shout, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon!" And the men, the enemy, the Midianites, they run, they cry, and in fear they take off. What an amazing turn of events. The army flees, greater than the 300 that Gideon has, and Gideon sends charge and instructions to the Israelites around to give chase after them and follow them down and hunt them out. They end up finding 2 of the princes of the Midianites, and they take their heads off, and they present them forth as victory. Listen, I'm going to tell you right now, the number of the Midianites was huge. The number of Gideon's army was 300. But there's a lesson to be learned here. Do you know what that is, boys and girls? Little is much when God is in it. What a great week it's been. I appreciate you coming back and having a wrap up to our Bible study, and I look forward to seeing you next week at 1 p.m. right here on YouTube and Facebook. Have a great week, everybody.